Hi, my name is Rachel Joseph and I'm going to read to you from my new book called Tales from a West Indian Childhood, which basically is short stories and poems from my experiences of being sent as a child to the West Indies to live with my father's family and to get away from the kind of racism and problems that mixed race families had in the 1960s. Just a few notes. Rachel and Sharon are twins and they were 4 years old. I was 8 years old and my sister Yolandi was 6. And this story is called Spelling Test. It was late morning in the early summer and the sun was not at its midday peak, yet it was far too hot to do anything except hide in the shade of a veranda. Rachel and Sharon sat on the steps, flipping a handful of small stones into the air and trying to catch them on the back of their hands. Yolandi lay on a bench watching a lizard running up the wall. "It must have sticky feet," she said, prodding at the creature with a stick. I sat on a stool next to Granny Rachel, who was in her rocking chair. We heard Uncle Darnell's truck squeaking and rattling as it came down the hill at speed. "Lord save us," said Granny, and she spat a line of tobacco spittle over the veranda wall. Uncle's truck pulled into the yard and with scrunching of brakes, stopping just before the lean-to on the side of the small house. The smell of sweat, booze and cigarettes reached us before he did. "You smell of the night," Granny said, tutting and raising an eyebrow. "You leave in a hurry?" Uncle Darnell puffed out his muscular chest, but offered no explanation for his missing shirt. "What are you doing here? What going on here?" Rachel was the first to speak. "We're playing." "Playing? You should be doing something useful like schoolwork." Granny kissed her teeth. "It's not a school day. Let them play now." Uncle Darnell ignored her. "Come on, let me see how clever you are." "Spelling test," he said. "Spell your name." Rachel spelled her name with ease, and Uncle smiled and ruffled her hair. Yolandi spelled her name correctly, and then she had to spell Joseph, which was no problem for her. "You older, your name too easy," he said when it came to me. I had to spell Antigua, Liberta, and then he paused before saying righteousness. Lucky for me, the word righteous had been in the readings we had worked on the previous evening's Bible class. I remember because when I read out loud to the class, I stumbled over the word several times. The word was pronounced righteous, even though it looks like it should be pronounced righteous. I wasn't sure of the ending. Was it N-E-S-S or N-E-S-T? I took a guess and going for the double S. "Good," he said, then turning to Sharon. "What about you?" Sharon was a slow learner and she didn't seem able to keep up with her twin when it came to book learning. She tried but failed to spell her name. After the second failed attempt, her face crumbled. She knew crying would make her father angry, so she struggled to hold back the tears, inhaling and holding her breath. He pointed at the floor in front of him, and she came up the steps and stood staring up at him, her whole body shaking. "Try again and get," he said, in a soft tone. "She's only a baby, Darnell. Leave she be," Granny pleaded. "Her sister's the same age and she can spell good," he snarled. Lifting his daughter off the ground, he sat on the ledge of the veranda wall. "Again, and get it right." He had his back to me, so I mouthed the letters and made shapes in the air with my fingers. Sharon repeated the words awkwardly. "S, H." "Look at me," he demanded, turning her face to his, and glaring back at him. We all waited in silence, not even daring to breathe, as Sharon, her voice trembling as so high in her throat she sounded like a choking sparrow, tried again. "S, H." She paused, her breathing stopped. "Oh!" The crack as his fist hit her face resonated under the low veranda roof. We all screamed as Sharon was propelled backwards off the wall, hitting the ground 10 feet below with a thud. Rachel and Yolandi started crying. I moved to go to Sharon, but Uncle Darnell put his hand out, stopping me. "Darnell, why you do so? Ain't that right?" Granny shouted, and heaved her 95-year-old body from her chair. Angrily, she pushed his arm aside and then turning to me, Go see, she ordered, forcing me past Uncle Darnell. Sharon lay motionless on the crushed tobacco at the bottom of the stairs. I bent close to her face, which was buried in the leaves. She was whimpering like a puppy. "I'm wrong," she said. "I don't know." I helped her sit up. She wobbled and I pulled the crushed leaves from her clothes. She leant heavily against me and her shaking body making me shake. She held so tight to my hand I thought she would break it. Uncle Darnell stood at the top of the step. He looked straight ahead of him. Granny was close behind him, anxiously looking down at us. "The child, she good?" she asked. Sharon whimpered. Her nose was bleeding. I prayed in my head, "Lord, Jesus, please, please, please." I was scared that he had not finished. There was more to come. Uncle Darnell had slapped us before and used a belt on us and even taken a stick to our backsides on numerous occasions, but this clenched fist violence was a first. Sharon looked up at her father as he came slowly down the steps. Her body became rigid and her breathing heavy. I held on to her, my whole body shaking violently. Uncle Darnell, without looking at his daughter, walked past and went to his bed. Granny came down the steps, grabbed Sharon, hugging her close and rocking her. Rachel and Yolandi stood at the top of the steps, looking lost and scared. I stood up, brushed the leaves from my dress, and went to my hiding place under the house, and I cried for my mum. Thank you for listening.